Irashaimase! Hello and welcome to Fitaurus Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fitaurus. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday. And on the menu this Saturday, we have Bells and Whistles. Or, as it's otherwise known, Detana TwinBee, the 1991 Konami Arcade classic. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. The second arcade title in the TwinBee series, Detana TwinBee released to arcades in 1991. It did see an international release, but primarily in Europe and under the title Bells and Whistles. It would later be ported to the X68000, the PC Engine, and then see release on compilations on the PlayStation, the Saturn, the PSP, and digital releases on the Wii, the Wii U, the PlayStation 3, and the Xbox 360. So this title's seen a lot of releases, and it's now available as an arcade archive title on the PlayStation 4 and the Nintendo Switch, which is the version I happen to be playing today. So this is a title that I've had a lot of interest in for quite a while, but I haven't actually played that much of, so I'm really thankful to have this opportunity to play the arcade version of it, courtesy of the Arcade Archives. In fact, because of the Arcade Archives, I was actually made aware that there is an English release for this one, something I was completely unaware of. So, as we start the game, there's actually a little bit of story here. This game kind of introduced a lot more to the TwinBee world, including the general look of it. Hello, is anybody listening? My name is Melora, and I live on the planet Meru. We are now being attacked by the forces of Iva. Please come quickly and save us before it's too late. So though we started the game on the English version, we're actually going to be looking at the Japanese version. I'll get to why here in just a little bit. So if you're familiar with TwinBee, you're going to be very familiar with the systems that are here. But right off the bat, and just going over things really quickly, we've got two types of attack. We've got an aerial attack where we can use to shoot down enemies in the sky, as well as a ground attack that we can use to shoot enemies on the ground. Shooting enemies on the ground gives us power-up items, as well as, well, most of the time point items, but every once in a while power-up items. And then our main way of getting power-ups is the bells. So if you shoot clouds, oftentimes these bells will come out of them. And you can continue to shoot the bells, and they'll cycle through various colors, giving you different power-ups depending on the color of the bell. And that's a very important system to learn, as that's, well, what you're going to be doing the whole time to keep yourself going. The bells also provide a great way to get points as well. The point values increase the more bells that you pick up, as long as you don't let any fall off the bottom of the screen, up to 10,000 points per each bell. It starts at 500 and just goes up from there. From the ground, there are some really great items that we can pick up, and we just picked up one of them is the third ship. So if you're playing as player 1, you play as the TwinBee. If you're playing as player 2, you play as the WinBee. And there's a third ship, the GwinBee. And that is a support ship that we can get by shooting the ground enemies, and every once in a while there'll be a power that we can pick up, and once we get GwinBee, we can connect with GwinBee, and GwinBee serves the function of increasing the power of our shot, basically giving us wave shot instead of our standard just normal P shot. There's also the really handy three-way shot that we can get from the ground, and there's also a star that will clear all the enemies, or all the aerial enemies rather, that happen to be on the screen. If you happen to be playing in a two-player game, then if you are immediately adjacent to your two-player partner, then you'll have the same effect as if you're connected with GwinBee, just a little heads up that way. And it's also possible to get a different attack that you can't get with GwinBee. That's if you're, so in a two-player game, if you're to the side, you'll get the same wave attack, but if you happen to have the two-player ship directly on top of each other, then you'll get a five-way shot that can be quite useful and like has a sound effect, at least on the Japanese version. So we're almost to the first boss. I haven't talked about one of the new additions to the TwinBee games that it was introduced in Detana TwinBee, and that's a charge shot, which is what that meter in the bottom left and right of the screen are, depending on which player you are. It's a very powerful, or rather it can be a very powerful charge shot, especially when teamed up with TwinBee, making really quick, rather laying waste to the first stage boss very quickly. Although that boss looks more like a boss that would be out of, or better placed in a Gradius game than TwinBee, but that's just like my thoughts on it. From here on out, I feel like they're a little bit more in place for this game itself. So, why did I choose to play the Japanese version rather than the English version? So aside from the text localization, there's two primary differences. And those differences happen to be in, one of them is the way that the controls are bound, and the other is voice samples. So in the English release, all the little voice clips that you hear when you start, when you happen to lose a life, when you pick up bells and get different power-ups, is gone, and all we have is like kind of what feels almost like a sterile game by comparison, at least to me. So for that reason alone, I definitely prefer the Japanese version of Detana TwinBee to bells and whistles. But there's also a control change. So I mentioned that we have an aerial attack and a ground attack. And in the Japanese version, those are on separate buttons, which is helpful because sometimes you need to be careful with where you're aiming your ground shot. As far as the English release, those are bound to the same button, and it's not possible to change that. At least not in the arcade emulation, which makes it rather difficult, I feel, to aim your ground shots effectively against the enemies on the ground. So those two reasons are the primary reason why I'm playing the Japanese version over playing the English version of this particular release. Although I'm very thankful that they're both available to enjoy, and that's like just yet again another great example of how well polished the arcade archive system is. So there I happen to have taken a continue, and at least one thing that's nice on this one is when you continue, you come back fully powered up with the three-way shot and a shield. So all we really need here is just some speed. Let's see if we can get some. I overshot that one. So some really bizarre, like, cute 'em up enemies here. We're almost to the second stage boss, and so by that being the case, I'll go into my minus and plus flavors. So the one minus flavor, and this is kind of just a complaint in general about the title, is just the removal of the voice samples from the English release. Some people might consider them, let's see, a little bit annoying or jarring after a while, but I do really like them. So for me, that's like something that I'm sad not to have present. And then, although for me it's like kind of a plus in so many ways, I miss, well, not like miss. Some of the boss fights in this game can get frustrating, but one thing I do appreciate about them is like all the boss fights have a different unique feel. They're not quite all the same. That's one of those things that especially the original TwinBee kind of has a problem with, where all the bosses feel like kind of one and the same. So it's nice to have at least some variance to that in this title. But this boss fight in particular, I just feel like there's too many times throughout it where it doesn't feel like enough is going on. That we don't have the ability to target the boss, or that we're like just going around kind of just being led on this like wild goose chase around the ship trying to take things out. And even now that we've got the core open, we can't attack it yet. We have to survive around these propellers, go to the front of the ship, and then we have to go to the back. Something that's really frustrating. But that's just a couple boss fights that I have like some complaints with. But then as far as the like plus flavors are concerned, I love how colorful and detailed all of like the sprite work is on this one. This is the first 16-bit TwinBee, and they did a wonderful job bringing this game to 16-bit. It's got all this various character art as well that introduced the pilots for the TwinBee and the WinBee that would become staples for the rest of the franchise, and indeed even launch radio like dramas and like anime as well. So it like helped kind of create an even greater sense of world to the whole like TwinBee franchise. So I just like love the art, and like now that we're in stage 3, like this stage is just a beautiful, beautiful example of a scrolling world. It's obviously inspired by Laputa. You've got all these beautiful sky castles, and just like the bizarre enemies that are always present in the TwinBee world. And then the biggest plus flavor for me personally is just that this is a TwinBee title. It's a series that's near and dear to my heart, and I really like just there's something about like TwinBee games that I just feel at ease and just love playing. So that'll just about wrap it up for this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. This is definitely a title that I can recommend if you're a fan of shoot 'em ups, vertical scrolling shoot 'em ups, and especially if you're a fan of the TwinBee series like I am. As always, I want to thank you so much for coming out and joining me this week, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.